Hello and welcome back, everyone. First of all, I'm happy to share with you all that now we are a family of 1000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. I'm really thankful and grateful for all your love and support. In today's video, as you guys have demanded about the Budapest Gambit, we are going to learn the Budapest Gambit. Budapest Gambit is one of the aggressive way for playing against one d4. It starts with d4 and black can respond with knight to f6. Now when white plays the Indian game by playing their pawn to c4, we can turn this into the Budapest defense or the Budapest Gambit by playing our pawn to e5. Now here there are generally two responses what white can do. Either white can capture the pawn on the e5 square or can push the pawn forward. In this video, we are going to discuss on both of these variations. Also, there's a general observation that I've seen that most of the players refrain from playing this Budapest Gambit because they think that there's only one variation and the opponent might be prepared about it. But in this video, I'm going to share with you 7 different lethal traps that will help you win the game easily or will at least give you a winning position. Okay, so first we'll start with what happens after d takes on the e5 square. Now, since the knight is in danger, we will go with our knight to g4. Now here, if he tries to defend this pawn on the e5 square with his knight to f3, then we can first play our pawn to d6. We can also put some more pressure on the pawn on e5 by playing our knight to c6. But what I suggest is play a pawn to d6. After pawn d6, if he captures, then we are happy to recapture it with our bishop on the e6 square, ahead in development, and our knight on g4 is in close proximity with the opponent's pieces. So they may try to give an attack to this knight on g4 square, let's say by pushing their pawn to h3. Now, if they do that, that is a losing error. Why? Because now we can first capture on the f2 square. If the king captures it, then bishop g3 comes with a check. If the king captures the bishop, then there's the discovered attack on the queen. Also, if he doesn't capture it, still he's going to lose the queen because the king cannot go back on the even square. The bishop still attacks it. So he captures here and you are winning the queen there. So pawn h3 is a losing error, which is a normal looking move but is an error. Let's say your opponent doesn't do that. Let's say what if he's not playing his pawn to h3, instead he's playing his knight to c3. Now knight c3 is actually defending the pawn on the d1, the queen on the d1 square, right? Now we can continue with the normal development, play a knight to c6. After he pushes his pawn on the h3 square, now you come back with the knight on e5. When he captures your knight, you recapture it. Now if he plays a normal move like pawn e3, trying for development of this bishop and castle, we can first go and castle our king. Now here if he plays his bishop to e2, again the idea is same, that he wants to castle on the next move. Then there's an interesting move you can play here. You can also, like this knight on e5 is putting the pressure on c4 pawn, and you can also play a bishop to e6 trying to give an attack to the c4 pawn further. But an interesting move here is to play the queen to g5. Now queen g5 gives an attack to the g2 pawn, and then eventually it will be an attack on the rook. If he tries to defend this pawn on g2 square with his king, like let's say he castles, then you are winning this game. How are you winning it? First, capture on the h3 square with the bishop. Now it's an attack on the g2 square. It will be a checkmate. If you push his pawn up, then the rook is gone. What can he do? If he blocks it with any other piece, you are going to capture it. So overall, it is a very good position for black. Also, there's a mating threat coming forward. Alright, let's come back to the position. What if he is not playing his knight to f3? Instead, he is playing his queen to d4. Now, queen d4 is giving an attack to your knight, also defending the pawn on the e5 square. But this is also a mistake because now you can first play a pawn to d6. That opens up the diagonal of this bishop so that it attacks it, and you are doing it in the gambit style. What you all want is you want to just do a quick development and an attack on the opponent. So you are playing a pawn to d6. If he captures your pawn, then you are happy to recapture it with your bishop. But before doing that, you first play a knight to c6. Attack the queen. Now, if the queen comes on e4 square, giving you a check, you are happy to develop again. You play a bishop to e6. When he captures on the c7 square, you capture it back with your queen. Now look at your pieces. All the pieces are so well developed. Next move, you're trying to come with the bishop to c5 or bishop b4 check. All your opponent has developed is a queen, which is a misplaced piece. Also, the pawn, a flank pawn. None of the other white pieces are developed. So here as black, you are doing much better than when compared to the white side. Queen d4 is also kind of losing. So what can he do? Let's say he defends the pawn on the e5 square with his f pawn. He plays his pawn to f4. Then also you can develop your bishop to c5. Now the idea is to take control of these weak squares that your opponent has and attack the f2 square. You can now play your knight to f2, attack the queen, give a double attack to the queen and the rook, or you can also play bishop f2, giving a check and destructing the king's position. Here, if he defends this by playing his pawn to e3, you can simply capture the pawn on the e3 square. That's a free pawn for you. Knight takes on e3, bishop e3, bishop e3. Or you can also try to play a pawn to d6. Now, the idea behind pawn d6 is to open up the e file. If he captures on the d6 square, then you can first capture it with your pawn, and then now if he places queen to f3 protecting it, h3 is also a losing error. If he places queen to f3, then you can first castle. He cannot capture the knight because the bishop protects it. Now if he wants to get rid of that knight on the g4 square, he will play his pawn to h3. That doesn't stop us from capturing the e3 pawn. You capture it with the knight, the bishop captures it, bishop recaptures, and if the queen captures on the e3 square, then it is gone because rook e8 comes with a pin and you win it. Again, if he is not capturing your bishop, look at this monstrous bishop in the opponent's camp and blocking the way of the king to go. The king is stuck in the center. None of the other pieces moved, only the queen, which is also misplaced. You have developed, you have moved your king into safety. Also, the other pieces are ready to jump in. So, this is also a good variation for black to play. Okay, finally, let's come back to the position. What if he is giving away the pawn on the e5 square, not trying to defend it? Instead, he is going for the development. Now, he is playing his pawn to e4. If he does that, then you don't capture it with your knight on the e5 square because he comes with pawn f4 and look at now his development. He's giving you an attack. Also, the knight is not in good position to go back and you look at his pawns. They are well placed. So don't capture on the e5 square immediately. Instead, you go for a normal move. You play a pawn to d6. Here, when he captures the pawn on the d6 square, we are going to capture it back with the bishop. Now, when he plays his pawn to h3, you cannot capture on the f2 square. Okay, this is something that you have to remember. You cannot capture on the f2 square with your knight because he captured. Now, bishop g3 doesn't win you the queen because this king can easily escape on the e2 square. So, don't play that. After pawn h3, what we can do is play our queen to h4, adding some more attack on the f2 square. He definitely cannot capture your knight because then he's going to lose the rook. The pawn is pinned to the rook. What else can he do? Let's say he plays his bishop to e3. Well, that's a free bishop because pawn on f2 is pinned. So you can just capture the bishop. Okay. What if he's not playing the bishop? What if he is playing his pawn to g3, trying to give an attack to the queen? Well, then you can simply capture the pawn on the g3 square when f takes on g3, queen g3, and you have exposed the king. Next, you can play your queen to f, knight to f2, give an attack to the queen as well as the rook, and you are going to win the material as well as you are having good development. Okay, one last try. What if the opponent plays his queen to f3? If he plays his queen to f3, then also you can play a knight to f2. If the queen captures it, then bishop g3 is a pin and you are going to win the queen. Isn't this interesting? Okay, many of you do comment that these traps are good, but it is kind of hard for you guys to remember it. So what you have to do is you don't have to remember everything. You have to just remember the logic. What is the logic? What are the forcing moves? C, C, T. Check, capture, threat. Or you are trying to give an attack. Right. So whenever you see a position, now once you have seen this, it will be easy for you to recognize the move. So what you have to ask yourself is, how can I do a CCT? How can I give a check? If not a check, how can I capture something? If I can't capture something, can I give a threat to my opponent? That means, can you give an attack to your opponent? So if you ask yourself this question, it will be kind of easy for you to find those moves. Okay, you don't have to remember every single move. You just have to remember the logic. Once you remember the logic, variations are kind of easy to remember. Okay, so we have seen everything what happens when he tries to defend the pawn, or even if he doesn't try to defend the pawn. This was when he takes on the e5 square, where d takes on e5. Now let's have a look. What if he's not capturing your pawn, instead he's pushing it forward? If he places his pawn to d5, then you are going to go with your bishop to c5, again with a quick development. Here, Since you are attacking this f2 square and this knight is over here, they might try to pin your knight. If he places bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen, then we don't worry about the queen at all. We are going to sacrifice our queen and we will be playing our knight to e4. Now, if he gets greedy and captures your queen, then it is a checkmate, bishop f2. Easy, right? But what if he knows that this is a checkmate on the f2 square? He's prepared against that, and if he places bishop to e3, then what can we do? So after he places bishop to e3, you can simply capture the bishop, the pawn takes it back, and now you can go queen h4 check. The only way to block the check is to play the pawn to g3, and you can capture the pawn on the g3 square as well. If he captures your knight, then the rook is gone. If he doesn't capture it, still you're going to give a discovered attack to the king and you're going to win the rook. So again, that is a winning thing for you. Okay. So this was when he was playing his bishop to g5. What if he is going for normal development? Let's say what if he is playing his knight to c3. Then we play our pawn to d6. After pawn e4, castle, knight to f3. Now look at this dangerous knight on the f3 square which can jump on the g4 square. And you are again giving an attack to that f2 pawn. How can he defend it? Let's say he defends it with his bishop coming on the e3 square. You can capture the bishop again. You will be a pawn up there. So it is a very, very, very good position for black to play. One last variation I would like to share here is what if he is after d5, he is not playing knight c3, he is not playing bishop g5. Instead, he is trying to stop this knight from coming on the g4 square. He is playing his pawn to h3. Then what you can do is first capture on the f2 square with the bishop. The king has to capture it back. Now knight to e4 is a check. If the king goes back, then queen h4 will be a checkmate. For example, if he goes back on the e1 square, then queen h4, this is a checkmate. And what if he comes up? Here, what if he comes up on the f3 square? Then also you go queen h4. Your idea is to go queen f2 or further play the knight to f2. Right. Here, if he defends it by playing his pawn to g3, then you first capture the pawn on g3 square, sacrificing your knight. If the king captures it, then sacrifice the pawn. Look, the forcing moves. Check. You play a pawn to f5 and give a check. The king captures the pawn. He has no other square to go to. Then again, look at the forcing move. What is the forcing move? Check, capture, threat. You give a check. How can you do that this time? Play a pawn to d6. A discovered check from the bishop. So the king has to go back on the e4 square again. And again, what are the forcing moves? Check, capture, threat. How can you give a check? You can play a bishop to f5, sacrifice the bishop, give a check. The king captures it, and then it's a checkmate in one move. Can you guys find it? Yes, it is queen to g6, a checkmate. Alright, this was all about the Budapest Gambit, when he places pawn to d4 and you start with knight f6. But what if he is not giving you the chance to play knight f6? So in that position, you can directly start it with pawn to e5. I will be covering this in our next video. Also, a few traps that I have missed in this video, we will be covering it in the next video. So stay tuned for more such amazing tricks and traps. Please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel and share with your chess friends. Thank you.